Hello friends, welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Cass, and today we are going to be talking about witchy books. Now, I know that fall doesn't officially start until the end of September, but let's be real. As soon as the weather starts to cool off and the kids go back to school, it feels like it's fall. And that is the perfect time to start pulling out the witchy books. I have a little obsession with witchy books. Last year, I was in my witchy era, and I was reading witchy books nonstop for months. So I have read my fair share of witch books. The thing that I love about witchy books, as I've come to learn more and more about the witch trials and all of the books that contain witches as characters, is that the term witch is just another term for feminist or being a woman. That a lot of times in history, when women were accused of being witches, they were simply feminist women who were looking for more rights as women. And the patriarchy shut them down by accusing them of being witches and causing people to become fearful of them, when really they felt like their power was being threatened by a woman. So a lot of these book recommendations I have for you have very strong, powerful women, feminist vibes because they were witches. But a few of them are a little more on the cozy, fun side, so you're going to get a little bit of both. Let's get started. Now, my first recommendation is going to be Cersei by Madeline Miller. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I was lucky enough to read this book for the first time while I was visiting the Ionian Islands in Greece, so I was in the perfect setting. But I gave this book 5 stars. This is a retelling of the mythological Cersei, who was born to a house of gods, and she seemingly possessed no higher powers and was kind of an outcast amongst her family and her siblings. And so she didn't feel like she belonged with the gods there and found companionship with the mortals. And this retelling is her story about being caught in the middle between the gods and the mortals and discovering that she has the power of witchcraft and what she does with that power and who she decides to become. Cersei makes an appearance in the Odyssey, and I love the reimagining that Madeline Miller does with this character, and highly recommend this book. The second book I have for you is Wayward by Amelia Hart. This book I also loved. It's one of my favorites, and it follows 3 different timelines. One timeline follows a woman during the witch trials of the 1600s in the UK. All of these take place in the UK. The next point of view is following a woman during World War II. And the third point of view is following a woman during present day. And these 3 women all have something in common, and we figure out what that is throughout the story. It shows that through all of these time periods, women are resilient and power of nature is on our side. The third book I have for you is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. This is also one of my all-time favorite books. I gave this book 5 stars the first time I read it, and I just reread it this year and gave it 5 stars again. It is excellent, and if you haven't read books by Alex E. Harrow, I highly recommend her. She has all the vibes. She's so fantastic. The thing I love about this book is she makes a lot of references to traditional fairy tales. So if you are a fairy tale lover, then you will really enjoy the Easter eggs that she drops throughout this. But in this book, we are following 3 sisters who have become estranged, and this is in the late 1800s in an imagined New Salem, post-witch trials, which happened decades before. And in this New Salem, witches supposedly don't exist. But these sisters all find themselves joining the women's suffragist movement for women to have equal rights. And along the way, they discover that there might be some remnant of witches left. And what it was supposed to be, the women's movement, suddenly becomes the witches' movement. I just think it's such a fantastic story that mixes the lore of witchcraft and witches and the Salem witch trials with the suffragist movement of women. Again, because I think there's such a strong connection throughout history between witchcraft and feminism. Number 4 is going to be The Change by Kirsten Miller. Now, this is a women's fiction book that follows 3 women in modern day in the New England area who all live in the same town. They all are different ages, different backgrounds, but they're each struggling in some way with finding their power and fighting against the patriarchy. Through a series of events, these 3 women cross paths, and together they end up finding the dead body of a teenage girl. And throughout the book, these women, while battling their own personal issues, are coming together trying to solve the murder of this teenage girl. And along the way, they're uncovering more and more secrets about the people around them and the town that they live in. And so this is a really fantastic book about women finding their power, especially in like midlife. And it has like a mystery element. So it's a very intriguing book. It's very relevant to our time today. So highly recommend this book. Okay, next on the list is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. And this is also a dual timeline book where we're following the story of this apothecary in the late 1700s, where women would go to obtain poison to murder men that had wronged them, usually their spouses. Back in those days, they didn't have a lot of options for justice or to be able to liberate themselves from bad situations. And so there was this like underground apothecary. These apothecary murders went unsolved for centuries until we get to modern day London, where this woman finds this old apothecary bottle by the river, and she starts to follow the trail that leads back to these unsolved murders. And we watch as she starts to figure out what really happened in the late 1700s. If you like historical fiction, magical realism, women's fiction, and like an element of mystery, then you should definitely check out this book. Okay, now the next book is Sloot by Brom. Now this is different from all the rest. It's really got the horror like on full blast. It's got these like gothic horror, creepy, really dark, disturbing vibes, okay? It's normally not my thing, but it has redemption. There is a lot of descriptions of really inhumane treatment of women. So I would definitely check trigger warnings for this book. But we're following this woman as she comes over from England to America, and she's betrothed to a stranger in the colonies, and her husband ends up dying under mysterious circumstances. And she's living in this colony that is a Puritan colony, very religious, very strict. Women have like no rights. And she finds herself struggling to survive as a woman in this colony. And it's about her finding her strength and finding her power. There's an element of revenge in there. The cool thing about this book is that Brom is also a very talented artist. And if you buy the hardback book, it includes several of his paintings, which is really, really cool. So the next book I'll recommend is The Secret History of Witches by Louisa Morgan. Now she's written a bunch of books that have the witchy vibes, but this is the only one I've read so far. I do have her other books on my TBR, but I read this one and I enjoyed it. The premise of this book is that witchcraft is passed down from mother to daughter, and we're following this family of witches for 5 generations, seeing what these women go through and how witchcraft in society has affected various historical events throughout this time. So it covers like a 200-year period, 5 generations. It really focuses on the sacrifices women make for their family and their contribution to society that has often gone overlooked. If you like historical fiction and the witchy vibes, and you like a generational saga, then I think you would really enjoy this book. Next up is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is the first book in the All Souls trilogy, and I'm in the middle of this series, but I did finish the first book, and I absolutely loved it. We are following our main character, who is a professor of alchemy, and she's at Oxford University, and she's doing research, and she pulls an ancient alchemy text from Oxford's library. And in doing so, she activates some magic, grabs the attention of all of these inhuman beings that are out in the world. It has all kinds of fantastical creatures in it. It's got witches and warlocks, demons, vampires. This book is historical fiction meets dark academia meets fantasy. So if any of that sounds appealing to you, I think you'd really enjoy this book. I know this has also been turned into a show that is currently, I believe, on Netflix. I highly recommend reading the book first. It was one of my favorite reads of last year. Next is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. And this is a story about women living in the medieval times in a made-up place in the Baltic. Very much draws influence from like Polish, Lithuanian, and Russian culture. It's a very wintry, icy landscape, and it has very strong fantasy and fairy tale vibes. We are following women, again, who live in a time where men control everything they do, and these women, through a series of events, cross paths, and we follow their journeys as they come into their power and they fight against evil. Even though this book isn't directly about witches, it very much has the same witchy feminist vibes, and witchcraft does exist in this world. Now, these last few recommendations are going to be more fun. The books I've mentioned up till now have been more serious reflections and evaluations on feminism and the witch hunts and witchcraft. These last few books are fun, more cozy, kind of Disney style representations of witches and witchcraft. But I still really, really enjoyed them, and they're super fun to read during this time of year. So the first one is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. Now, I sum this up as a witchy rom-com. You know, it's not gonna blow you away, but it's definitely fun. The banter is 10 out of 10, and I really, really enjoyed my time. So if you want a rom-com that gives you witchy vibes, then I recommend this book and all of the other books in this series. Definitely pick them up. The next one I'm going to recommend is The Witches of Moonshine Manor, and this is one of my favorite books. I'm definitely rereading it this fall. It is indie published, so it's not super popular, but I absolutely loved it. The premise is that we're following these women as adults as they are meeting back up. They were raised like sisters under one roof in a house for basically orphaned witches. They were all found as girls who had been outcast by their families or their, towns for being witches, and were all raised under this one roof. It is really hilarious, and I just had a really great time. So if you go into it to laugh, but it does have witchy vibes, it does have feminist elements, it just does it in a very comedic way, then I highly recommend. And finally, I'm going to recommend The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. Now, you've probably heard of this book because it was very popular on BookTube last year, but it is a cozy fantasy about a world where witches exist, but they're not supposed to. And this woman gets asked to come and train these 3 orphaned witches who are sisters, who don't have anyone to teach them how to use their powers. And it's just a very heartwarming, cozy fantasy with a romance subplot that is really, really great. I just think it has very cute, cozy fall vibes with a little bit of romance. Okay, you guys, that is it for my witchy recommendations for this fall. I have a whole new stack of books that I will be checking out, so hopefully I will have even more witchy recommendations for you in the future. If you like these kind of books, definitely hit subscribe because you are my people, and you will be seeing more of this throughout fall. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite season is, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!